VSE, and we got a brand new product for the 2017 to 2025 GM L5P Duramax. So what we got is an integrated catch can, and they're going to be broke up SKUs. So 2017 to 2019 they'll be their own SKU. 2020 to 2024 will be a different SKU, and 2025 will be their own SKU by themselves, and we'll cover that here in a second. So what we got is an integrated catch can, and the way that this thing works, it's a quick release design. So you can pull the pin and then release the assembly and then drain the assembly and then reinstall it. So the way that the insides of the catch can work are, there is an internal baffle assembly. So if flow goes this way directionally from the arrow, and if I rotate the catch can over, you'll see that we have an internal relief valve, a crossover relief, and a one-way directional baffle on the inside. So we did this because we knew if we ever made a catch can for an L5P, and we've been asked to do this for a long time, that the problem is if this is full of oil and the truck were to roll over, or there ever become an issue, or the catch can ever become full, we needed a way to, one, bypass the catch can in its entirety, and two, limit the oil flow outside of the catch can so we don't end up in a runaway vehicle, which could be a problem. So we solved that issue with this design. The other benefit of this design, once it's installed, this will be the 17 and 19 bracket that mounts on the truck, and then this is the 2020 plus bracket. But what's nice about this it has a rotary design in it, so you could install this and then reclock this every 15 degrees all the way around the truck to make this thing fit universally for your application. It makes it really nice if you guys are doing custom or custom one-off components or one-off pieces. That design makes things really, really simple and really, really nice. Why this is needed? So the issue with the L5P, and it's always been there, they have the CCV issue that we've always seen. The plastic plunger, it likes to push out. It likes to blow CCV through the system and into the intake air horn. The other significant issue is that these trucks develop a lot of blow-by over the course of time, and that blow-by integrates into the EGR and forms like a sticky paste and mixture that sticks on the heads, valves, turbine blading, and all kinds of other stuff. So I want to show you guys, I just got this truck back from Steamboat Springs. I pulled about 40,000 pounds, skid loader, a whole bunch of bunks of wood and stuff to Steamboat Springs, Colorado and back. It's about 1,500 miles, fully loaded. And I'll show you about what we saw on how much oil was deposited into this catch can that's on this truck. I've actually not taken this off yet, but it'd be interested to see what this thing looks like. So First Form, which is our sponsors for this, we're going to be using First Form Energy drinks and First Form Company to show how much oil actually came out of this system. So I'll kind of show you really quick how it comes apart. So step number one, and this is on the system, right? This has our CCV kit on it, the billet aluminum CCV kit. So you pull this pin up, and then you turn this assembly off, and then the can comes all the way out. And what's going to be in here is emulsified oil and just a whole bunch of other just contaminants and crap from the CCV system. So you can kind of see what's in there. None of it's really good. This thing's been sitting in the dyno bay since I got back from Steamboat, and I'm going to pour it right into here, and I probably won't use this again. We got the marks that start every 4 ounces and go all the way up, just so you guys can see it. And then this is just this truck's probably got like 3,000 or 4,000 miles on the oil, I'd say, somewhere in there. So this is kind of what's coming out of it. And if you see, it's just kind of emulsified oil and just stuff from the CCV system. And this is what would normally go into the inlet of the turbocharger, which would coat the turbocharger fins, which I'll show you in a second, and then flow through the system. So I'll let that sit there for a second. And then to put this can back on, you'll literally just put it right back up underneath, and then this pin that sits here, it will just catch on these tabs, and then it will lock right back into position. So if you kind of see, you just put it up in there, and then the pin will open, and then it'll snap, and that's your security lock. So it's locked on 3 different places, plus a security catch, so this will never come out, and there's 2 O-rings to keep that from ever leaking. So that's the way that the can itself is integrated. And about what we caught is that first mark is 4 ounces. The second would be 6. So 4 ounces of oil in 1,500 miles. And again, this is 1,500 miles of pretty extreme towing. I would say if you're around town driving, there'd be a little bit more of the water mixture in here because of the hot and cold starts and stuff like that. But again, there's nothing good about this oil. So the other thing that happens, and I'll kind of show you guys so everybody knows that we rebuild turbos here at VSE. This is from a PCV system, so these are about the same mileage of truck. This turbo actually had a failure, and these are factory turbochargers. So the PCV system on this turbocharger here was in moderately okay shape. This shows you about how much oil is going into the system, and this is with a failed CCV system. So the user would never know if the CCV system has ever failed. What happens is the PCV flows right into the inlet of the Y bridge. You can kind of see that here if you zoom over, Brady. This hose that would normally go into the inlet of the turbo horn, the turbocharger would draw a vacuum across that, which is doing right here with our catch can in place, and it would suck that into the turbo through the intercooler and then shove it into the inlet of the EGR Y bridge right here, and then form that sticky mixture that goes into the cylinder heads. And it's also what plates out on the map sensor, which is right there. So everybody that has map sensor issues, a lot of times that's caused from EGR, but it's EGR plus the PCV mixture. And you can kind of see that, like if we go back to the turbocharger compressor here, you really kind of see how much of that stuff is plated off on the turbocharger fins versus a CCV system that's probably in decent shape. Again, a lot lower mileage turbocharger here compared to this thing here. So again, that's the differences in the CCV, one that's working good and then one that's not in such good shape. But again, when it comes to putting a catch can on your truck, we're stopping this altogether because we're removing all the oil that's going into the inlet of the turbocharger. So what I want to show you is a couple things on the installation. So again, this is the 2020 to 2024 design. The 2025 is here. It's a little bit different, and I can kind of show you, this is with the factory CCV installed. So this is the factory CCV, and a lot of people probably haven't seen this yet. We're coming out with a new product for this, but this is the factory CCV box that a lot of people notice. This has an actual crankcase pressure vacuum switch here, and it has lines that would run into our catch can and then back into the intake air horn. So that's the 2025 model. You can see the brackets the same as the 2020 plus. The only real difference is the crankcase pressure switch is in existence on the 2025 models and did not show up in the previous model. I think that's a really good idea from General Motors. Again, we got a piece for this here in the near future to release. You can also put our CCV kits on this. So again, that's that design. And then this is the 17 and 19. This truck is under construction, putting compounds on it. But you can see where we have mounted, and there's pictures on our website. This is the mounting location for the 17 and 19. Again, you can route it to the factory CCV, or you can route it to our CCV system. You can kind of do whatever, but the kit's made to be universal. So I want to talk a little bit about what's in the kit. So these are meant to be universal because we don't know how you guys are going to install them. You can install them with CCV routing to the ground, which we'll talk about in a second. You could talk about installing them with it going to the intake air horn, or you could talk about just routing them to some other custom mount or using our CCV kit. So you're going to get all these pieces in the kit. You're going to get universal hose. You're going to get instructions. You're going to get a 180-degree elbow if you wanted to install it with our CCV kit. So all this stuff comes in the kit with the catch can assembly and the bracket. So there's no guesswork on how to actually install this or looking for some random fitting in the middle of the night. So you guys get all this stuff. It's all there. I want to talk a little bit about what we did for testing. So the OEM draws about 2 inches of water column across the intake air horn. So we mimicked that, and the cool thing was the 2025 version has a crankcase pressure switch, so we could monitor that when we were doing testing. So what we decided to do was drill and mount these baffles in the same exact design and location. So when the catch can is in function and in use under high load, we're drawing the same exact amount of crankcase vacuum that you would if the truck had its factory configuration in it. Again, we didn't want to impart any more crankcase pressure by putting a catch can in the system than we would if it was otherwise stock. So that was like a really important thing for us to figure out. So I got 5 questions and then one little bonus question here. So why not route the crankcase to the ground? So there's a couple reasons. Number one, you typically coat the underside of your truck, as these trucks have a lot of blow by eventually. You get drops of oil all over the ground. But the more significant reason that people don't ever talk about is if you're venting the crankcase to the ground and you're building pressure up inside the crankcase, the idea is, and the OEMs are really smart about this, it's not just for emissions control. People are drawing a vacuum, a small vacuum inside the crankcase to minimize the differential pressure across the engine seals. And the highest differential pressure is drawn under the maximum amount of load. So if it's 14.5 PSI outside and otherwise you'd be drawing a small vacuum across the engine seals when you connect it to the intake air horn, the best thing you could possibly do is to draw a small vacuum just like the OEM does to minimize how much pressure is built up inside the crankcase. That's why we choose to route them to the intake air horn to minimize the chance of leaking a front or rear main seal. And realistically, we see a lot of trucks that get a lot of miles on them and they got the draft hose routed to the ground and they got a front or rear main seal leak. So that's the idea behind this. What happens if you internally block this catch can? So there's a reason that we mounted this entire assembly really close to where you would draw the vacuum, not a long ways away. The real reason is keep the heat in the engine bay on the can, and that minimizes the dew point changes inside this catch can. And this is no joke. Having this increases the amount of heat across the can if it's close to the motor as you could possibly get it. But the real thing that we did was internally, which we already covered, we put a crossover relief valve on the inside. So if this catch can for some reason were to freeze up or something were to happen internally, just you name it, right? This crossover relief would literally bypass the entire contents of the can and this baffle because the relief valve is above the column of where the baffles were drilled. So the relief valve would basically save the day. The change interval, it's another question that everybody asks us on the LM2, LZ0 market for the little 3 liters. We ask you guys to change, at least pull this catch can at every 5,000 miles and empty it out. You guys are gonna find out that there's a significant amount of oil in these things. Normally that oil would sit in your intercooler and then the motor would eventually consume it. You'll find if you ever drain an intercooler on an L5P, there's a ton of oil sitting in the bottom of it. But the idea is 5,000 miles, literally it takes you under a minute. Take this off, drain it. You should be changing your oil at 5,000 miles anyways. Just drain this guy. You know, this holds 16 ounces. I just showed you that we had like 4 ounces and 1,500 miles of oil. So 5,000 miles, I would drain that. The other good question is, what happens if the catch can becomes full and you forgot to drain it? Again, what's gonna happen inside the catch can, you're gonna have oil that goes through the top of it. Once this becomes covered, the baffle plates become covered, you won't be able to draw any more low pressure area inside the can. So it's just gonna relieve right across the relief valve. And then the can's gonna function as if you just had hoses connected directly up. You won't be taking any more oil out of the system. It's just gonna flow CCV right into the motor like it normally would. But again, stay on top of maintenance. It's just a maintenance item is all. Other colors, people have asked us about this. Right now we're releasing raw because we're barely gonna be able to keep up. Eventually we'll do an anodized black in the future. Custom applications, these will eventually fit on the L5D, but right now they're all the cab and chassis models for the pickup trucks. We'll release them for some other applications down the road as time goes on and some other models go on. And then somebody asked us about returning oil to the crankcase. Why don't we just dump this back in the crankcase? Or why don't we make a self-draining catch can? That is literally the dumbest idea I've ever heard in my life. What happens inside this catch can is a massive dew point change. We're taking advantage of the dew point change when we draw a vacuum through the can. So if the can gets full of oil, what's in here is emulsified oil. It's like a water slurry mixture. If you drive it a lot in town, if you drive it a lot of cold starts, hot and cold cycles, you're gonna get a lot of oil in here. You would never, ever, ever, do not dump this ever back into the crankcase. It's gonna be a horrible mixture. As you kind of saw that we drained out of that, there's just really nothing good. And then lastly, We're doing a limited release initially, but we will have a massive release of these as we actually get caught up on orders and some other stuff. The entire kit's here. There's really nothing to worry about. The 2025 model, we are holding off the market until I finish testing on this, until we make 100% sure with our CCV system and with this under the maximum load as we get more and more time on the 2025s, that the catch can system does exactly what it's designed to do, which is not, number one, not cause any check engine lights, and number two, actually pull the right amount of vacuum across this can and this baffle system to make sure that we're removing the most amount of oil that we possibly can. Any other question, you can hit us up, RUNVSE.com, Instagram, social media, all the feeds you could possibly hit us on. You call in to the dealer line, you can call into any of the extensions, sales line. But again, we're pretty happy to release this and draw this finally across the finish line for y'all. Thanks.